Hey guys, Dr. Ducey here, MTFUcoach.com. Going to be a little bit of a long one, but you're going to want to stick around for this one. This is some good stuff here. Steroids in athletics, pro sports, and bodybuilding. Just when did they start to be used? You know, the ordinary bellwether, halcyon time period or date that everybody likes to reference is 1960. That's our 1959 or 1960 when Dianabol and testosterone started being used in all sports, particularly bodybuilding. Uh, and I'm going to avail you of some information which will offer you some insight where you may feel that that's not necessarily the case. 1849, I've got a timeline written out here. I can ramble, I don't want to do that, so I want to keep some cohesiveness here. 1849 was a year that testosterone was discovered and that it was produced by the testes. That's 1849. And they determined, it was determined that testosterone was responsible for muscle mass and strength and endurance. So at that point, they discovered that, and we know before 1849, obviously there was no testosterone, testosterone-like substances. They didn't know that it existed. The first professional athlete to use any type of exogenous performance-enhancing purported drug. Exogenous means created outside the body and taken via pill form or injection. That athlete's name was Pud Galvin. He was a Major League Baseball player, first pitcher to win 300 games. He played in 1875 to 1892, and he took something called brown Sicard extract. It was extracted from the testes of smaller animals like guinea pigs and rats. And it was a steroid-like elixir, as it was described in the literature. It was understood it could increase physical abilities. There's nothing in the literature as far as how this Galvin fellow responded, but there you go. The first instance of somebody taking something from outside the body and hoping that it made you a better athlete, stronger, better, faster, better endurance. 1936, a researcher named Charles Kachakian researched how testosterone could increase muscle mass. And he did studies on soldiers, and this is the year he caught the attention of the pharmaceutical companies. And actually in 1935, they started working on this because, of course, they saw an opportunity. And in 1935, the first product known as synthetic testosterone was produced. So that's 1935. We reference 1960 as what everyone buys into as far as when steroids started to be used. And now we're talking 1935. They were already created by pharmaceutical companies. 1945, a researcher named Paul DeCroof wrote a book called The Male Hormone. And this book extolled the virtues of testosterone and, again, how it can increase your muscle mass and give you better endurance, and make you stronger and make you repair quicker. And this book extolled all of that, and the book was disseminated first on the West Coast and then in the heartland all the way to the East Coast, and bodybuilders got a hold of this book and they were like, man, I want some of that. And, so would I. Of course, they didn't know about any of the bad effects back then, if there are any. Just a quick segue, this all being said, 1935 versus 1960, could it be said that the 1939 Mr. America, the first Mr. America, the 1948 Mr. Universe, that's around the time of the first Mr. Universe, these postulates would offer that it's potentially true that these substances were used in these contests. There's no way to really tell, but they did exist. So I don't know if we should be so steadfast holding to the year 1960 as to when steroids first started being used. We all know John Grimek, first Mr. America, and in 1948 he started working with Dr. John Ziegler, the father of Dianabol. And Grimek in the literature is admitted to Ziegler having him try a 6-week trial of Dianabol. Grimek said he got no effects from it. The only thing he got was painful shoulders, but even still, Ziegler convinced him to disseminate the Dianabol, the little blue pills, to all the York lifters, all the Bob Hoffman's guys who would ultimately go in the World Championships. At first, Bob Hoffman was averse to this, but Hoffman, he wanted his guys to be taking his protein of the sea, the most god-awful, worst-tasting protein in the world. But, obviously he was a businessman. He wanted his guys taking his supplements. But in essence, Hoffman himself ended up taking some of the Dianabol himself. So they got the York lifters on board. You're looking at years 1952 to 1956. And the literature shows that Russian athletes use them, and possibly even earlier. Ziegler in 1954, he ended up going to the Vienna World Championships with the U.S. weightlifting team. And he was agog over the Russians were so far ahead of our guys. It's like two groups of humans. How can one group of humans, they're all humans, be so far ahead of the other group? He went out with one of the Russian doctors who, as an aside, was never seen again after this. And they got kind of drunk, and the Russian doctor admitted to him, look, our guys are taking this testosterone substance. This is why we're kicking so much ass. Well, Ziegler went home, and he ended up working again with the SIBA company, gave him all this information, and they produced this stuff, and he ended up using on himself, athletes, and even some of his patients, excuse me. An interesting aside, we've all heard of Androstenedione, the Prohormone. I love that stuff. I was buying that from Rich Gaspari in the form of M1T back in, geez, the year 2000 or something like that. And that was the best product I ever used until they made it illegal because they decided one day that it was different than it was the day before, which is utter nonsense and tomfoolery. But Androstenedione was first synthesized in 1938. The media would make you think it was stumbled upon in 1998. It's not true. It was recognized as an athletic performance enhancer by the Health Organization of the League of Nations. So this was an acknowledgement that hormones could be used as a performance enhancer 20 years prior to the date everyone holds onto as far as the beginning, 1960. I'm not buying that 1960 number. I don't like how everybody says everybody before that was natural. How do you know? You don't know. Don't get into your romantic, whimsical love affairs with some of these athletes and they could do no wrong. Look, I've got to say, in my opinion, this is my opinion, I look at certain pictures of Steve Reeves and I say that's testosterone. Because look, you know, you got to understand one thing. The mind of an athlete has not changed. They want to win. If the guys back then had all the stuff the guys have today, they'd be doing that too back then because that's the mode of thinking. Okay, it's not a consignment on their character or anything like that. I don't care if you do drugs or not. I do not. There's not one fragment of a fiber in my body that I give a fuck as far as what you do. I don't care. Okay. Probabilities. The Germans used testosterone in the '36 Olympics. This is what I think. The soldiers definitely used it in World War II. In fact, the literature plaintively states that Adolf Hitler himself used it. It was also used after World War II, the muscle wasting and the cachexia that the concentration camp victims were suffering from. They were given the anabolics in order to counteract that. You know, it's a very good thing. You know, going back to DeCruyff, who wrote the book, he stated that injectable testosterone cypionate, enanthate, and propionate, all injectable synthetic testosterone-based anabolic steroids, were all available by 1940. Okay, and it was also part of his lifestyle by 1945. You go. I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from this great book, Muscle, Smoke, and Mirrors. It's a part of a 3-book volume by Randy Roach. I met him when I judged as Mr. America. Great guy, amazing guy. He's totally blind, and he wrote probably the best, most complete, detailed tome on physical culture that I've ever laid my hands on. It's absolutely amazing. Just read 2 passages here really quick. As far as advertisements for steroids, and if Frank Myers, if you're listening, and Lance Stranahan, if you're listening, you guys have both posted advertisements that SIBA used to run in magazines from the 30s and 40s, advertising the nuances and goodness of anabolic steroids and selling them to the general public. Okay, so they were there. Further, bodybuilding historical collectors Kilha and Bondurant have both been in possession of copies of advertisements from SIBA endorsing synthetic testosterone aimed at the bodybuilders in 1947 to 1948. Obviously, the SIBA pharmaceutical company had a broader market in mind than just convalescing patients in the medical community, and they would maintain that pursuit, as we'll see. And also, the general consensus when reading the literature on the beginning of steroid use in bodybuilding is that it originated out of York with the weightlifters and John Ziegler's Dianabol in the very early 60s. However, as I have outlined, when looking at the curious minds of Bill Pearl and Irvin Johnson, also known as Rio H. Blair, best protein powder ever, in 1956 and 1958, and that the young John Grimek in 1943, along with the fact that SIBO was advertising the bodybuilders in the 40s, one has to wonder when steroid use really began in bodybuilding. York may have been the first athletic venue for Dianabol, but it certainly wasn't SIBO's first marketing foray into the muscle industry, as we have seen from their above-mentioned 1940s advertisements. Now you got to decide on your own. And I say really worry about yourself, but also read and learn as much as you can. I'm still learning every single day. I know very little, but what I know pretty well. And for what I don't know, I surround myself with really smart people who can fill in the gaps. That's all I have to say. Your thoughts, questions, considerations, and ideas are appreciated. List them below. They are my oxygen. You have a great weekend. Dr. Mike Dusa. Have a great night.